The autumn leaves crunched beneath Maya's worn sneakers as she hurried through the school corridors, her head down, books clutched tightly against her chest. She had perfected the art of invisibility over the past 3 years at Lincoln High, moving like a shadow through hallways that felt more like battlefields. Her dark hair fell like a curtain around her face, shielding her from the world that had shown her little kindness since her family had moved to this small town. Maya's heart raced as she approached her locker, hoping against hope that she could grab her things and escape to the safety of the library before he noticed her. But luck, it seemed, had abandoned her long ago. The familiar sound of expensive sneakers squeaking against the polished floor made her stomach drop, and she didn't need to turn around to know that Derek Sullivan was approaching with his usual entourage. "Well, well, look what we have here." Derek's voice carried that distinctive mix of arrogance and cruelty that had haunted Maya's nightmares for months. "If it isn't our favorite little bookworm, scurrying around like a scared mouse." Derek Sullivan was everything Maya wasn't: popular, wealthy, athletic, and seemingly untouchable. The son of the town's most successful businessman, he commanded respect through fear and wielded his social status like a weapon. His perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes were like armor, protecting him from any consequences of his actions. To the teachers, he was charming and respectful. To students like Maya, he was a nightmare wrapped in privilege. Maya's hands trembled as she fumbled with her combination lock, desperately trying to ignore the snickers from Derek's followers. She had learned that responding only made things worse, that any sign of defiance would result in escalated torment. But her silence, rather than deterring him, seemed to fuel Derek's need to dominate. "Hey, I'm talking to you, scholarship girl," Derek sneered, using the cruel nickname he had coined for her. The entire school knew that Maya's family struggled financially, that her mother worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat after her father had left them with nothing but debt and broken dreams. Derek had weaponized this knowledge, turning Maya's circumstances into ammunition for his daily attacks. The hallway had grown quiet, other students either too afraid to intervene or too entertained by the spectacle to walk away. Maya finally managed to open her locker, her hand shaking so badly that she dropped her chemistry textbook. As she bent to pick it up, Derek's foot came down hard on the book, trapping it against the floor. "Oops," he said with mock innocence, his green eyes glittering with malice. "Clumsy me. You know, Maya, maybe if you spent less time with your nose in these books and more time figuring out how to dress like you belong here, people might actually want to be around you." The words cut deep, not just because they were cruel, but because they echoed the insecurities that Maya carried every day. Her clothes were secondhand, carefully mended and cleaned, but obviously not from the boutiques that Derek's crowd frequented. Her lunch was packed from home because she couldn't afford the cafeteria prices. Everything about her screamed different in a place that valued conformity above all else. Maya tugged at her book, but Derek's foot remained firmly planted. Around them, phones appeared, ready to capture her humiliation for social media posterity. This was Derek's favorite part, not just the private torment, but the public spectacle that would follow her long after the hallway cleared. "Please," Maya whispered, the word barely audible. It was the first time she had spoken directly to Derek in months, and the vulnerability in her voice seemed to surprise even him. For a moment, something flickered across his features. Was it uncertainty? Regret? But it was gone so quickly that Maya wondered if she had imagined it. "Please what?" Derek's voice was quieter now, but no less dangerous. "Please stop pointing out the obvious. Please pretend like you actually belong in the same school as the rest of us." "Please what, Maya?" The use of her actual name, instead of his usual cruel nicknames, caught Maya off guard. There was something different in his tone, something that made her finally look up and meet his eyes. What she saw there wasn't the usual cold satisfaction she had come to expect. Instead, there was something she couldn't quite identify, a shadow of something deeper, more complex than simple cruelty. "Please just let me get my book," Maya said, her voice stronger now. "I haven't done anything to you, Derek. I don't understand why you hate me so much." The question hung in the air between them, and for a moment, the hallway felt suspended in time. Derek's followers shifted uncomfortably, sensing that something in the usual dynamic had changed. This wasn't following the script they all knew by heart. The script where Maya remained silent and Derek remained untouchably cruel. Derek's jaw tightened, and Maya saw something flash across his face that looked almost like pain. But then the moment passed, and his familiar mask of indifference slid back into place. He lifted his foot, allowing Maya to retrieve her book. But as she stood up, he leaned close enough that only she could hear his next words. "You want to know why?" His voice was so low it was almost a whisper. "Because you remind me of everything I'm not allowed to be." Before Maya could process what he meant, Derek had turned and walked away, his entourage trailing behind him like confused satellites. Maya stood frozen by her locker, Derek's cryptic words echoing in her mind. "Everything I'm not allowed to be." What could that possibly mean? The rest of the day passed in a haze of confusion and anxiety. Maya found herself analyzing every interaction she had ever had with Derek, searching for clues to understand his parting comment. In chemistry class, she caught him staring at her from across the room, but when their eyes met, he quickly looked away. During lunch, she noticed him sitting alone at his usual table while his friends had moved to a different spot, engaged in animated conversation without him. It wasn't until Maya was walking home through the park that separated her neighborhood from the school that she saw Derek again. He was sitting alone on a bench near the pond, his expensive jacket discarded beside him, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He looked small, vulnerable, nothing like the intimidating figure who had terrorized her for months. Maya's first instinct was to take a different path, to avoid another confrontation. But something about the defeated slump of his shoulders made her pause. Against every survival instinct she had developed, she found herself walking toward him. Derek looked up as she approached, his eyes widening with surprise and something that might have been fear. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual authority. "I walk this way home every day," Maya replied, stopping a few feet away from the bench. "The question is, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at football practice or something?" Derek let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, apparently I'm not welcome there anymore either." He looked down at his hands, which Maya noticed were scraped and bruised. "Turns out being a complete jerk to everyone eventually catches up with you." Maya studied his face, searching for signs of another cruel joke, another trap designed to humiliate her. But all she saw was exhaustion and something that looked suspiciously like genuine remorse. "What happened to your hands?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Derek glanced down at his injuries as if he had forgotten about them. "Got into it with Jake Morrison after school. He said some things about." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter. I deserved it." Jake Morrison was Derek's former best friend, the quarterback to Derek's running back, the other half of Lincoln High's Golden Boy duo. If they were fighting, something significant had shifted in Derek's carefully constructed world. "What did he say?" Maya asked, taking a small step closer. Derek looked up at her, his green eyes reflecting a pain that Maya had never seen before. "He said I was a coward. Said I picked on people weaker than me because I was too scared to face my own problems. Said I was pathetic." Maya felt a strange twist in her stomach. After months of being Derek's primary target, she should have felt satisfaction at hearing that he was finally facing consequences for his actions. Instead, she found herself feeling something uncomfortably close to sympathy. "Were you," she asked quietly, "picking on me because you were scared?" Derek was quiet for so long that Maya thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My dad expects me to be perfect. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect everything. But I'm not perfect, Maya. I'm not even close. And every time I see you, working so hard, caring so much about school, about doing the right thing, it reminds me of who I used to be before I learned that being good wasn't enough." Maya sank down onto the other end of the bench, maintaining distance, but no longer standing over him. "Who did you used to be?" A sad smile crossed Derek's face. "I used to be a lot like you, actually. I loved reading, loved learning. I was going to be a teacher, or maybe a writer, but my dad made it clear that those weren't Sullivan ambitions. He wanted a son who would take over the business, who would be tough and ruthless and successful by his definition. So I became that person, Or at least I tried to. Maya processed this information, trying to reconcile the vulnerable young man sitting beside her with the tormentor who had made her life miserable. "That doesn't excuse what you did to me," she said finally. "No," Derek agreed immediately. "It doesn't. Nothing excuses that. I saw myself in you, and instead of embracing that connection, I tried to destroy it. I thought if I could break the part of you that reminded me of who I used to be, maybe I could convince myself that person never existed." Maya felt tears pricking at her eyes, not just for herself, but for the boy Derek had apparently buried in his effort to become who his father wanted. "Why are you telling me this now?" Derek stood up abruptly, pacing to the edge of the pond. "Because I can't do it anymore. This morning, when you asked me why I hated you, I realized that I don't hate you at all. I hate myself. And I've been taking that out on you for months, and that's not just wrong, it's unforgivable." The word hummed between them like a challenge. Unforgivable. Maya turned it over in her mind, testing its weight against the months of pain and humiliation she had endured. Was it unforgivable? According to any reasonable standard, yes. Derek had systematically destroyed her self-confidence, isolated her from potential friendships, and turned her school experience into a daily ordeal. But looking at him now, seeing the genuine anguish in his posture, Maya found herself thinking about forgiveness, not as something Derek deserved, but as something she might need for her own healing. "My mom always says that forgiveness isn't about pretending someone didn't hurt you," Maya said slowly. "It's about choosing not to let that hurt control your life anymore." Derek turned to face her, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. "Maya, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm going to make sure everyone knows that what I did was wrong." Maya stood up and walked to where Derek was standing. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of carrying a false identity for so long. What if I said I was willing to try? Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't happen, but trying to forgive. Derek's eyes widened. Why would you do that? Maya thought about all the anger she had carried, all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, all the mornings she had dreaded coming to school. The anger was still there, but it felt different now, less sharp, less consuming. Because carrying all this hate is exhausting, and because maybe the person you used to be is still in there somewhere. Derek's composure finally cracked, and Maya saw tears forming in his eyes. "I don't know how to be that person anymore. Maybe we can figure it out together," Maya said, surprised by her own words. "I mean, not together, but I don't know. Maybe we can both try to be better." Derek wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dirt from his scraped knuckles across his cheek. "I hurt you so badly, Maya. How can you even consider being kind to me?" Maya thought about her mother, working double shifts at the diner and the grocery store, never complaining, always finding something to be grateful for. She thought about her grandmother's stories about growing up during the war, about how the people who showed mercy in the darkest times were the ones who found their way back to the light. "Because someone has to choose kindness," Maya said. "And maybe if we both try, we can make things better, not just for us, but for other people too." Derek nodded slowly, as if testing the weight of the possibility. "What would that look like? I mean, practically?" Maya considered this. "Well, first, you stop being a bully. Not just to me, but to everyone. And maybe you start standing up for people instead of tearing them down. And if I do that, if I really change, you'd be willing to what? Be friends with me?" The word friends felt enormous, weighted with all the history between them. Maya wasn't sure she was ready for that level of trust, but she was willing to consider the possibility of something different than their current dynamic. "Maybe we start with not being enemies," Maya suggested, "and see where it goes from there." Derek extended his hand tentatively, as if offering a handshake to seal their fragile agreement. Maya looked at his scraped knuckles, remembering all the times those hands had knocked books from her arms or shoved her in the hallways. But she also saw the tremor in his fingers. The uncertainty that suggested this gesture meant more to him than any casual handshake. Maya reached out and took his hand. His grip was gentle, careful, nothing like the aggressive contact she had grown accustomed to. "This doesn't mean everything is okay," she said clearly. "It means we're going to try to make things okay." "I understand," Derek said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Maya, for giving me a chance I don't deserve." Maya released his hand and took a step back, needing some physical space to process what had just happened. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me if you actually follow through." Derek nodded, understanding the challenge in her words. "How will I know if I'm doing it right?" Maya almost smiled at the question. "You'll know because people will stop being afraid of you. You'll know because you'll start sleeping better at night. You'll know because you'll remember who you wanted to be before you decided you had to be someone else." As Maya walked away from the pond, she felt a strange lightness in her chest, as if she had been carrying a heavy backpack for months and had finally been allowed to set it down. She wasn't naive. She knew that Derek's transformation, if it happened at all, would be gradual and imperfect. She knew that forgiveness was a process, not a single decision. But for the first time in months, she felt hopeful about the possibility of change. The next morning at school, Maya approached her locker with the usual butterflies in her stomach. Habits formed over months of trauma don't disappear overnight, and her body still prepared for confrontation even as her mind held onto the possibility of something different. Derek was already at his locker when she arrived, but instead of approaching her with his usual entourage, he was alone. When he saw her, he offered a small, uncertain nod. Not friendly, exactly, but not hostile either. It was a start. Maya made it through her first 3 classes without incident, but the real test came at lunch. Derek typically held court in the cafeteria, regaling his table with stories designed to belittle other students. Maya usually ate alone in the library to avoid being a target, but today she decided to try eating in the cafeteria. She had just sat down with her homemade sandwich when she heard Derek's voice across the room. Her muscles tensed automatically, but when she looked over, she saw something unexpected. Derek was talking to his usual crowd, but instead of mocking other students, he was shutting down their attempts to do so. "Come on, man, leave her alone," Maya heard him say to one of his friends who was making cruel comments about a freshman girl's appearance. "She's not bothering anyone." His friend looked surprised, as did the others at the table. This wasn't the Derek they knew, the one who led the charge in social cruelty. Maya watched his confusion ripple through his group, and she realized that Derek's transformation would come at a social cost. His friends had bonded over their shared sense of superiority, and without that dynamic, their friendship might not survive. Over the following weeks, Maya observed Derek's gradual metamorphosis with fascination and cautious optimism. It wasn't smooth or easy. There were moments when she saw him start to fall back into old patterns, when the muscle memory of cruelty almost overrode his new intentions. But each time, he caught himself, and each time, the recovery came a little faster. The most dramatic change came when Derek finally stood up to his father. Maya learned about it through school gossip, which reported that Derek had been seen arguing with his father in the parking lot after a football game, their heated conversation visible to anyone passing by. Apparently, Derek had defended a teammate his father was criticizing, leading to a confrontation that ended with Derek walking away from both his father and the football team. Maya found Derek in their usual spot by the pond the next afternoon. He looked exhausted but somehow lighter, as if he had finally set down a burden he had been carrying for years. "I heard about what happened with your dad," Maya said, sitting down beside him on the bench. Derek nodded, staring out at the water. "He's not speaking to me. Says I've become weak, that I'm throwing away everything he's worked to build for our family." "How do you feel about that?" Maya asked. Derek was quiet for a moment, then surprised her by laughing. "Terrified, but also free. I never realized how much energy I was spending trying to be someone I'm not." Maya studied his profile, noting the absence of the tension that had always seemed to radiate from him. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know," Derek admitted. "I've been thinking about what you said, about remembering who I wanted to be. I've been writing again, for the first time in years, and I talked to Mrs. Henderson about maybe tutoring some of the younger kids who are struggling in English." Mrs. Henderson was the school counselor, known for her work with at-risk students. The idea of Derek, former tormentor of the vulnerable, wanting to help struggling students was so unexpected that Maya felt a flutter of hope in her chest. "That's really good, Derek." He turned to look at her, and Maya was struck by how different his eyes looked now. The hard edge was gone, replaced by something softer and more genuine. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his backpack. Maya tensed slightly, old reflexes still ready for cruelty. But Derek pulled out a book. Not just any book, but a leather-bound journal with her name embossed on the cover in gold letters. "I remembered that you mentioned wanting to write," Derek said, his voice uncertain. "You said once, in English class, that you kept a diary, but had filled it up. I thought maybe. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but I wanted you to have something that was just for you." Maya took the journal with trembling hands. It was beautiful, clearly expensive, and entirely unexpected. "Derek, I can't accept this. It must have cost." "Please," Derek interrupted. "Let me do this one thing. I've taken so much from you. Your peace of mind, your sense of safety at school. I know I can't give those things back, but maybe I can give you something that's just yours, something beautiful that no one can touch." Maya ran her fingers over the smooth leather cover, feeling the raised letters of her name. No one had ever given her anything so personal, so thoughtful. The gift felt like more than a journal. It felt like an acknowledgement of her worth, her dreams, her right to take up space in the world. "Thank you," she whispered, and meant it completely. Derek smiled, and Maya realized it was the first time she had ever seen him smile without cruelty behind it. "There's something else," he said. "I want to tell you about the college thing." Maya looked up from the journal, curious. Derek had been accepted to several prestigious universities on both academic and athletic scholarships, a fact that had been widely celebrated in their small town. It was assumed he would follow his father's path into business school and eventually take over the family company. "I'm not going to state for business," Derek said. "I'm going to accept the academic scholarship to Wilson College, and I'm going to study education. I want to be a teacher, Maya. Maybe high school English, maybe elementary, I don't know yet. But I want to help kids, especially kids who are struggling or different or scared." Maya felt her eyes widen. Wilson College was a small liberal arts school with an excellent education program, but it was far from prestigious in the way Derek's family valued. Choosing it over a business degree at the state university was essentially choosing his own path over his father's expectations. "That's amazing," Maya said, and she genuinely meant it. "You'll be a good teacher, Derek. You understand what it feels like to be lost, and that's going to help you connect with students who need someone to believe in them." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "Do you really think so? Sometimes I worry that I'm fooling myself, that I've done too much damage to ever really help anyone." Maya thought about forgiveness again, about second chances, and the possibility of redemption. "I think people who have been in dark places are often the best at helping others find the light," she said. "Your mistakes don't disqualify you from doing good. They might actually make you better at it." As spring turned to early summer, and their senior year drew to a close, Maya and Derek's unlikely friendship deepened in ways that surprised them both. They began studying together, first tentatively, and then with growing comfort. Derek helped Maya with math and science, subjects that had always challenged her, while Maya helped him rediscover his love of literature and writing. Their friendship wasn't without its challenges. Other students were confused and sometimes hostile about their association. Some of Maya's few friends worried that she was being naive, that Derek's change was temporary or manipulative. Some of Derek's former friends accused him of betraying their social group and tried to pressure him back into his old behaviors. But perhaps the most difficult challenge was learning to trust each other completely. There were moments when Maya would catch herself flinching when Derek moved too quickly, her body remembering months of intimidation. There were times when Derek would start to respond to stress or frustration in his old patterns, then have to consciously choose a different approach. "I hate that I'm still scared sometimes," Maya confessed one afternoon as they sat in the school library working on their respective college essays. Derek looked up from his laptop, concern immediate in his expression. "Of me?" Maya nodded reluctantly. "Not of you exactly, but of going back to how things were. Sometimes I have dreams where you decide this whole friendship thing was a mistake and go back to being a monster. Derek finished quietly. You weren't a monster, Maya said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. You were hurt and hurting others, but that's not the same thing as being a monster. Derek saved his document and turned to face her completely. Maya, I need you to know that I will never, ever go back to treating you or anyone else the way I did. Not because I'm a perfect person now, I'm not, but because I've learned what it costs. I know what it feels like to hate yourself so much that you try to destroy other people to feel better, and I never want to feel that way again. Maya studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or uncertainty. What she saw instead was a young man who had genuinely reckoned with his past and chosen a different future. I believe you, she said, and realized that she truly did. The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. The last vestiges of their old dynamic, the fear, the resentment, the careful distance, began to dissolve, replaced by genuine trust and affection. They were no longer a bully and his victim trying to build something new. They were simply two friends who had found their way to each other through forgiveness and mutual understanding. Their friendship became a source of strength for both of them as they navigated the challenges of senior year. When Maya's family faced eviction due to her mother's missed work during a bout with pneumonia, Derek quietly helped connect them with resources and even contributed anonymously to a fund set up by their church. When Derek faced intense pressure and disappointment from his father about his college and career choices, Maya stood by him steadfastly, reminding him that his worth wasn't determined by anyone else's expectations. The most meaningful moment of their friendship came during graduation week. Maya had been selected as valedictorian, an honor that would have seemed impossible during the dark months when Derek's bullying had nearly convinced her to drop out entirely. As she worked on her speech, she found herself thinking about forgiveness, about second chances, and about the unexpected ways that healing can transform not just individuals, but entire communities. I want to talk about you in my speech, Maya told Derek as they sat in their favorite spot by the pond, reviewing their graduation remarks. Derek looked alarmed. Maya, no. This is your moment. Don't bring up all that old stuff. I'm not bringing up the old stuff, Maya clarified. I'm talking about transformation. About how sometimes the most important growth happens not in spite of our mistakes, but because of them. Derek was quiet for a long moment. What would you say? Maya pulled out her draft and read aloud. I want to talk about a friend of mine who taught me that people can change in ways that seem impossible. This friend showed me that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who are hurting the most themselves. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to offer grace instead of revenge, we can help each other heal in ways that make both of us stronger. Derek's eyes filled with tears as she read. You don't have to do that. I want to, Maya said firmly. Because our story isn't just about you changing or me forgiving. It's about what's possible when people choose courage over comfort, growth over safety, love over fear. On graduation day, Maya delivered her speech to a packed auditorium. When she reached the section about transformation and forgiveness, she caught Derek's eye in the audience. He was crying openly, not from shame but from gratitude and amazement at the journey they had traveled together. After the ceremony, Derek approached Maya with his family, not just his father, who had finally begun to show grudging respect for his son's choices, but also his mother and younger sister, who had watched Derek's transformation with wonder and pride. Maya, Derek's mother said, taking her hands, I don't know exactly what happened between you and Derek, but I know that you helped my son find his way back to himself. Thank you. Maya squeezed her hands and looked at Derek, who was beaming with a joy she had never seen in him before. We helped each other, she said simply. As they prepared to leave for different colleges, Maya to the State University on a full academic scholarship, Derek to Wilson College to begin his education program. They made plans to stay in touch, but more than that, they made a commitment to carry forward the lessons they had learned from each other. Promise me something, Maya said on their last day in their hometown. Anything, Derek replied. Promise me that you'll remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Promise me that you'll choose kindness, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Derek nodded solemnly. I promise. And you promise me that you'll never forget how strong you are. You survived my worst behavior and still found a way to see the good in me. That kind of strength can change the world. Maya smiled, thinking about the journal Derek had given her, now filled with stories and poems and dreams for the future. I promise. 5 years later, Maya was finishing her graduate degree in social work when she received an email from Derek. He was in his final year of student teaching at an inner-city elementary school, working with children who faced many of the same challenges Maya had faced: poverty, family instability, social isolation. I think about our conversation by the pond every day, he wrote. When I see a kid who's struggling, who's angry or scared or lost, I remember what you said about people who've been in dark places being the best at helping others find the light. I'm trying to be that light for them, the way you were that light for me. Maya wrote back immediately. I always knew you'd be an amazing teacher. Those kids are lucky to have someone who understands that beneath every difficult behavior is usually a hurt heart that needs healing. Their correspondence continued over the years as they both built careers centered on helping others. Maya became a school social worker, specializing in supporting students who were bullied or marginalized. Derek became a beloved elementary school teacher, known for his ability to connect with the most challenging students. They met in person again 10 years after graduation, when Derek was receiving a teaching award for his work with at-risk children. Maya had driven 3 hours to attend the ceremony, and as she watched Derek accept his award and give a speech about the importance of believing in every child's potential for change, she felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude for the journey they had shared. Did you ever imagine we'd end up here? Derek asked afterward as they sat in a coffee shop, catching up on a decade of life. Maya looked at her friend, truly her friend now, without qualification or reservation, and thought about the scared, angry boy he had been and the scared, hurt girl she had been. No, she said honestly, but I'm so glad we did. Derek nodded, then grew serious. Maya, I need you to know that what you did for me, choosing forgiveness when you had every right to choose revenge, it didn't just change my life. It taught me how to help other people change theirs. Every kid I've been able to reach, every student who's found their way from anger to hope, that's partially because you showed me what grace looks like. Maya felt tears pricking her eyes. And what you've taught me about the courage it takes to completely change who you are, that's helped me support so many kids who thought they were stuck being the person they were at their worst moment. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found their way from the darkest possible beginning to a friendship that had shaped both of their lives in profound ways. You know, Derek said finally, I still have that first essay you helped me write in Mrs. Peterson's class, the one where I had to write about someone who had influenced me. Maya laughed, remembering. You were so mad that I corrected your grammar. I wrote about you, Derek said quietly. Even then, when I was still learning how to be a better person, I knew that you had changed something fundamental in me. You taught me that the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who help other people get back up. Maya reached across the table and took Derek's hand, the same gesture that had sealed their fragile peace by the pond a decade earlier. But this time, there was no uncertainty, no fear, no reservation. There was only gratitude for the unexpected gift of a friendship born from the ashes of cruelty and nurtured by the power of a forgiving heart. Thank you, she said, for having the courage to change. Thank you, Derek replied, for having the courage to let me. As they parted ways that evening, Maya reflected on the long journey from that first terrible day when Derek had taunted her by her locker to this moment of deep, abiding friendship. The path hadn't been straight or easy, and there had been moments when both of them had doubted whether real change was possible. But they had proven that even the most damaged relationships can be healed when people are willing to do the hard work of transformation. Derek had learned to replace cruelty with kindness, aggression with empathy, and destructive pride with humble service. Maya had learned that forgiveness isn't weakness, but the ultimate expression of strength, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to let someone else's worst moment define their entire story. Their friendship had become a testament to the truth that people can change, that hurt can be healed, and that sometimes the most unlikely connections can become the most precious. In choosing to see the possibility of good in someone who had shown her only cruelty, Maya had not only freed Derek from the prison of his own anger, but had discovered depths of grace and strength within herself that she never knew existed. And in choosing to completely remake himself, rather than remain trapped in patterns of behavior that brought only pain, Derek had not only found redemption, but had become living proof that no one is beyond hope, no matter how far they have fallen. Together, they had written a story that neither could have written alone, a story of transformation, redemption, and the miraculous power of a forgiving heart to change not just one life, but all the lives that life touches. It was a story that would continue to unfold in the children they helped, the students they supported, and the countless ways their friendship had taught them both that love, in the end, is always stronger than hate. Years later, when Maya and Derek were both established in their careers and had families of their own, they would still meet annually by that same pond where their friendship had been born. They would bring their children, and they would tell them the story of how enemies can become friends, how hurt can become healing, and how the choice to forgive can transform not just two lives, but ripple outward to touch an entire community. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that no one is beyond redemption, no hurt is beyond healing, and no heart is beyond the transformative power of forgiveness. It was a story that proved, above all else, that sometimes the most beautiful friendships grow from the most unlikely soil, watered by tears of repentance and nurtured by the inexhaustible grace of human love.